What is the Sabbath and why is it so important? Well, Sabbath is from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means seven, and it refers to, in Genesis, in the Bible, when God created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, God rested and celebrated all of God's creation, looking around and seeing that it was very good, and taking a break from the work of creating. In Judaism, Saturday is still known as the Sabbath, of course. It's the seventh day of the week. And in Judaism, a day is thought to begin with the sundown, what other people might call the night before. So on Friday night, Jewish people consider that the beginning of their Sabbath because that's what's considered the beginning of the day Saturday. And so Sabbath services are often celebrated on Friday evening, and some are also celebrated on Saturday morning. So when Christianity developed as an offshoot from Judaism in its very inception, the people that were Jewish by ethnicity and now decided to become followers of Jesus, they would get together and celebrate the Sabbath, and then they'd come back together on Sunday and celebrate the day of the resurrection of Jesus. And so they had 2 days of celebration, and then the Apostle Paul eventually started evangelizing to people outside of the religion of Judaism and out into the larger Greek and Roman empires, and found that people didn't want to celebrate both the Sabbath and the day of the resurrection. So eventually they stopped doing that and just started celebrating on Sundays. And that's one thing that really ended up distinguishing Christianity from its parent religion of Judaism, that they were not celebrating on Saturdays. So today, if you want to learn a lot about the Sabbath, I suggest that you read some good teachings from Jewish rabbis, because there's so much thought put into what the Sabbath is and how important it is. My favorite theologian, 20th century theologian, is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote an amazing, very small but powerful book called The Sabbath. And in it, he talked about how most religious people, be they Jewish or Christian or anything else, most religious people want to find God in a space. And so we go inside a cathedral or a church or a synagogue or a mosque or a temple, or even further, we do a pilgrimage to a holy land, and we want to find God in a particular space. And Rabbi Heschel calls the Sabbath the cathedral in time. It's finding God not in space, but in time. Going into that special cathedral where you and God will meet in a different kind of way than how you meet during the week. So the reason it's so important to me, this idea of Sabbath, and for me, that's whether I'm taking that Sabbath on Saturday or some other day of the week. For me, the day is not as important, although Sunday cannot be really the Sabbath for any Christian pastor that's leading worship on that day, because if you're working, it's a different mindset than if you're taking the Sabbath where you unplug from all work. So to me, it's, I usually take Saturdays to unplug, or if I can't, because of some other kind of work, I take some other day during the week. To me, it's important for several reasons. One reason is that the older I get, the more I realize I'm really goal-oriented, and I think that most of us are. I think that in our culture, particularly our American culture, more than most cultures actually, in the United States, we are encouraged to set goals and achieve them, and to work really, really hard, and to be focused on that with most of our waking hours. And truth be told, I love accomplishing goals. I think that's a lot of fun to dream up things and embrace vision that God gives you, and then work hard and smart and focused to make those things happen. But the problem, if you're doing that 7 days a week constantly, is that you start to believe that that's your identity. And in Christianity, not only is it not the case that we are our failures, we also are not the sum total of our achievements. Our failures and our achievements is what we do, but it's not who we are. We are beloved children of God. Whether we succeed or fail, that's largely not relevant to our identity. It's relevant to our happiness and to how well we are perhaps embracing God's mission in this world, and those things are important. But in terms of our identity and our worth, our successes and failures mean really nothing. Our identity was given to us by God. We were created in the image of God. We were said to be loved from the beginning. That's what baptism claims. And in fact, in Lutheran theology, Luther talks about something that's often translated as the happy exchange, or the benevolent exchange, or something like that, where Christ exchanges identities with humanity. So Christ takes on the nature of humanity and lives as a human. This is God in human flesh living in this world as he did 2,000 years ago, and encountering all that it means to be human, with suffering and temptation and betrayal and all that it means to be human, including death, and then transcending death in order to heal that. But in that exchange, not only did Christ take on what we are as humans, but Christ exchanged it for us taking on divine identity. So we often don't want to talk about that because we don't want to seem prideful, because remember, the first sin in the Garden of Eden is Adam and Eve thinking they can be just like God. And so we don't want to be prideful or arrogant. We are not the creator. We are the creatures. And yet with that identity that was given to us by God, we have been completely redeemed and restored. And we are so far beyond good. In fact, what we have is we have righteousness, which means holiness and perfection in that deep sense of the word. That doesn't mean that we don't sin. It doesn't mean we're perfect in that way. Of course, we make mistakes. But in terms of our identity, we are absolutely blessed and beloved and good. This is all written out very clearly in the book of Romans, if you want to go read that in more detail. So if we just get caught up in achieving our goals every single day of the week, we can start to believe that we are those goals, and that if we fail at them, that there's something wrong with us, and that if we succeed in them, then somehow we're enough now, that we're better, that we're okay. And all of that is a lie, because our identity is already infinitely priceless and valuable. So to have a day where we disconnect from work not only is good for us physically, I mean, we're not machines, we can't keep running all the time, we will exhaust ourselves, but also we remind ourselves of our loved nature, and that it has nothing to do with our activities or achievements or relationships or anything else. God has already given our identity, signed, sealed, and delivered. It is done. So when we take that Sabbath time where we rest, where we celebrate the last week, just like how God celebrated in the Garden of Eden, what God had created, where we can connect with people and things and ideas and books that we love, we will remember more of who we truly are. And then when we get to the end of our lives, we don't want to be one of those kinds of people that has that kind of regret on the deathbed of, I worked so hard at the office, and then on the weekends I cleaned out the garage and did all this housework and did all these errands, but I never really knew my kids, or I never really knew my relationship with God, or I never really knew my deepest dreams and goals and values. We don't want to be that person. So we want to have that time where we can disconnect and create memories of love and of well-being and of rest and of peace, and enjoy this world that God has given us. And then after the Sabbath, when that's done and then we get back at work, we will not only have more physical energy because we've rested, but we will have emotional storehouses of having been receptive to some real truths, going into that cathedral in time and meeting who God is and connecting with who our family is and seeing the real depths of those truths that then will guide us the rest of the week. So hope that makes sense. Happy Sabbath to you whenever you choose to observe it. I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.